The fire did not slow as the night deepened. It grew wilder, feeding on dry grass and shattered trust alike, turning familiar paths into rivers of flame. Smoke pressed low against the ground, blinding and choking, forcing the Pridelands to move by instinct rather than sight. Kion ran until his chest burned, the Lion Guard never leaving his side, even as the land they swore to protect seemed determined to destroy itself. Cries echoed everywhere now, not Hustvier but rage and grief tangled together. Families were separated, old alliances dissolved in panic. Predators helped prey only to turn on each other moments later when desperation twisted judgment. Balance was no longer broken in theory. It was broken in action, in every choice made under fire. Kion skidded to a halt near a collapsing acacia grove, flames crawling up the trunks like living claws. A group of animals was trapped between advancing fire and a deep ravine. Without waiting for orders, the Lion Guard moved. Best lowered his massive body, forming a bridge as smaller animals scrambled across his back. Fully sprinted through the smoke again and again, guiding the injured before their strength failed. Ono hovered above the blaze, coughing through the thick air but refusing to leave, shouting warnings about falling branches and shifting wind. Bunga leapt fearlessly into danger, dragging frightened cubs and hatchlings to safety, his fur singed but his spirit unbroken. Kion watched them, pride and pain crashing together in his chest. This was what the circle of life was meant to be. Not rules, not destiny. Action, choice, sacrifice. And yet it was slipping away faster than he could save it. The darkness followed them, and no longer lingered at the edges. It moved openly now, slipping through fire and smoke, untouched, whispering reassurance where fear peaked. It told those trapped that suffering would end if they stopped resisting. It told those angry that destruction was justice. It did not command. It convinced, and that made it far more dangerous than any enemy Kion had faced before. In one clearing, Kion found two groups facing each other across scorched ground, flames forming a glowing circle between them. Teeth were bared, claws dug into ash. The darkness hovered above them like a silent judge. One wrong move would turn the clearing into a slaughter. Kion stepped forward, heart pounding. He raised his voice, but it cracked under the weight of smoke and doubt. Words about balance died in his throat. Isawit, 10 painfully clear. They were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting to be right. The darkness spoke through their silence, asking why anyone should hold back when the world was already ending. Why mercy should exist in a land that burned. Why the circle deserved saving when it had allowed this to happen. Kion felt the roar surge violently, shaking his very bones. The ancestors stirred, not guiding him, but waiting. For the first time, the decision was truly his. He could roar and force obedience, end the conflict in an instant, or he could risk everything on something fragile and uncertain. He chose neither. Instead, Kion walked into the circle of fire. Gasps rippled through the crowd as heat licked at his fur. He stood there, unprotected, vulnerable, eyes locked on both sides. He spoke, not loudly, but clearly. Every word carried by desperation rather than authority. He said he was done asking them to believe in balance because it was tradition, done defending a circle that had been treated like a shield instead of a responsibility. He told them if they wanted the Pridelands to burn, they would have to burn him first. The flames crackled louder. The darkness recoiled slightly. Confused, Kion spoke of every time power had been used instead of listening, of every time fear had been ignored because balance demanded patience. He admitted his failures openly. The Guard's failures, the ancestors' failures. He did not ask forgiveness. He offered truth. One by one, claws loosened, teeth lowered. The fire between them burned on, but something else flickered to life, faint and unsteady. Doubt. Not fear-driven doubt, but the kind that asks whether destruction is really the answer. The darkness pressed in harder, furious now, twisting the fire higher, trying to drown thought in chaos. It reminded them that Kion's words would not stop the flames, that confession would not rebuild what was lost, that the Pridelands would never be whole again. Kion agreed. He said the Pridelands would never be what they were. Balance would never be simple again. The circle of life would never feel safe or automatic. And maybe that was the point. Maybe it was never meant to be easy. The Lion Guard stepped beside him then, forming a line not of dominance, but defiance. They were exhausted, burned, afraid, yet they stood anyway. Not because victory was guaranteed, but because giving up would make the darkness right. The fire continued to rage across the land, unstoppable now. Kion realized with a heavy heart that this war would not be won tonight. Not with roars, not with speeches. Survival itself would be the victory. As the wind shifted and flames surged toward them once more, Kion made a choice that would change everything. He turned away from the fight, ordering the guard to lead as many as they could beyond the burning borders of the Pride Lands. The decision tore through him like claws, but he knew the truth. A land could be rebuilt. Lives could not. Behind them, the darkness laughed softly, satisfied. The Pride Lands burned brighter than ever as the Lion Guard ran toward the unknown, carrying hope through fire, while the world they knew collapsed into ash. Ash fell like black snow as the Lion Guard ran, the heat at their backs chasing them toward the edge of everything they had ever known. The Pride Lands roared behind them, not wheat life, but with fire-consuming grass, trees, memories. Kion did not look back again. He had already looked once, and that single glance had carved itself into his heart forever. Pride Rock stood silhouetted against flames, no longer a symbol of rule, but of loss. The land beyond the burning borders felt wrong beneath their paws. Too quiet, too empty. Survivors moved in broken lines behind the guard, eyes hollow, bodies shaking, carrying nothing but fear in each other. Predators and prey walked side by side now, not because balance had been restored, but because there was no strength left to fight. Survival stripped everyone down to the same truth. They did not stop until dawn broke weakly through smoke-clouded skies. When they finally collapsed near a dried riverbed, exhaustion overtook them all at once. Bodies sank into ash-covered earth. Quiet sobs echoed softly. Some stared at the horizon where fire still glowed, unable to accept that their home was gone. Kion stood apart, chest heaving, legs trembling beneath him. The roar was silent now, not gone, but dormant, as if it too mourned. For the first time since becoming leader of the Lion Guard, he felt completely unsure of who he was without the Pride Lands beneath his paws. The darkness arrived even here. It did not need fire anymore. Loss was enough. It seeped through grief, through the hollow silence after survival. It whispered that running proved that the circle of life had failed completely, that Kion had chosen fear over destiny, that the Pride Lands burned because balance was a lie no one truly believed in. Some listened. Kion saw it in their eyes, not anger now, but surrender. The belief that nothing was worth rebuilding, that ashes were all that remained. The darkness grew stronger in that quiet despair than it ever had in rage. The Lion Guard felt it too. Fuli paced restlessly. Anger turned inward. Besht sat non-mobbing, staring at the ground as if his strength had finally failed him. Ono's wings drooped, his sharp mind clouded by the images he could not forget. Even Bunga was silent, his usual fire replaced by confusion and hurt. Kion realized then that this was the true final battle. Not fire, not claws, not shadows rising from smoke. Hopelessness. He stepped forward slowly, exhaustion dragging at every muscle, and spoke again, though his voice shook. He told them the darkness was right about one thing. The circle of life they had known was gone. Burned. Broken beyond repair. There would be no returning to what was. The darkness leaned closer, eager. Kion continued. He said balance was never the land, never the rules, never the roar. Balance was what they chose to do when everything else was taken away. And right now, all they had left was choice. He did not promise rebuilding the Pride Lands. He did not promise peace. He did not promise safety. He promised only this: as long as they chose to protect life instead of destroying it, darkness would never fully win. The Lion Guard moved beside him again, slowly, painfully, but together. Not as symbols, as proof. Besht lifted his head, planting his massive paws firmly into the ground, choosing to stand. Fully stopped pacing, eyes sharpening with new purpose, choosing control over rage. Ono straightened his wings, choosing to see the path forward instead of the ashes behind. Bunga stepped forward last, small but unbroken, choosing belief, even when it hurt. The darkness recoiled, not defeated, but weakened. It fed on certainty and despair, and now it found resistance in something far messier and harder to crush. Hope that did not deny pain, hope that accepted loss. As the sun finally pierced the smoke, its light fell on faces marked by soot and tears, but also by resolve. The Pride Lands were gone, but the circle of life was not finished. It had changed. It no longer lived in borders or crowns. It lived in the choice to protect one another when nothing else remained. Kion lifted his head toward the light, not as a king, not as a chosen one, but as a leader shaped by failure and fire. The final war had ended not with victory, but with survival. And from the ashes of the Pride Lands, something quieter, harder, and more real began to rise. The night the Pride Lands burned would be remembered forever, not as the end of balance, but as the moment it stopped being a rule and became a promise. The night the Pride Lands burned began with a wind that did not belong to any season. It carried ash before fire, fear before sound, as if the land itself was warning those who still listened. Kion felt it the moment he opened his eyes. Long before the first flames touched the grass, something ancient had shifted, something final. This was not another test of balance. This was the end of all chances. Pride Rock stood silent against a sky stained red by distant fires. The stars were hidden, choked by smoke that rolled across the plains like a living thing. Kion stood at the edge, his paws trembling against stone that had held generations of kings. The roar inside him stirred violently, not with confidence, but with grief. For the first time since he had inherited it, the roar felt afraid. Behind him, the Lion Guard gathered without being called. They had learned to read the land as well as they read each other. Fuli arrived first, breath quick, eyes sharp, her speed useless against a darkness that spread faster than any sprint. Best followed, his massive frame steady but his expression heavy, as though he already knew how many he would not be able to save. Ono circled above them, wings cutting through smoke-filled air, his voice tight as he reported fires spreading from every direction. Bunga came last, unusually quiet, his usual confidence replaced by a seriousness that made Kion's chest ache. The Pride Lands were burning. Not by accident, not by nature. Fires had been lit deliberately, drawn like lines across the land to divide, to trap, to destroy. Predators ran not to hunt, but to survive. Prey scattered not from fear alone, but from fury. Old boundaries meant nothing now. The circle of life had not cracked this time, it had been torn apart. Kion leapt down from Pride Rock and ran toward the chaos. The Lion Guard at his side, heat pressed against their fur as they moved through smoke and flame. Cries echoed everywhere, calls for help layered over roars of anger. This was not war between enemies. This was war between beliefs. They reached a clearing where flames surrounded a group of trapped animals. Without hesitation, Best charged through the fire, his thick skin burning as he pushed a path open. Fuli darted in and out, guiding the weakest to safety before the smoke stole their strength. Ono shouted directions from above, his sharp eyes finding openings no one else could see. Bunga fought fire with reckless courage, rolling through embers to smother sparks before they spread further. Kion stood at the center, raising his voice above the chaos, calling for calm that did not come. No one listened. Fear was louder than leadership now. From the smoke, figures emerged, not united by species, but by rage. They spoke openly of the circle's failure, of nights spent hungry or afraid, of promises broken by balance that favored no one yet protected some more than others. They blamed the past. They blamed destiny. Some blamed Kion himself, accusing him of guarding a system that had never guarded them. The words struck harder than claws. Kion felt the roar surge, power begging to be unleashed. One roar could end this madness. One roar could scatter the flames, silenced the shouting, forced order back into the land. But as he looked around at the fear and fury burning in every eye, he understood the cost. Order would return. Trust would not. The darkness chose that moment to reveal itself fully. It rose from the fire and smoke, not as a single form, but as a presence that bent the air and pulled attention toward it. Calm replaced shouting wherever it spread. It did not need to raise its voice. It spoke through certainty, through the promise that this pain meant something, that the destruction was necessary, that the circle of life had reached its end, and something stronger would rise from the ashes. The lad listened. Kion felt his heart sink as he realized how ready they were to believe it. The Lion Guard closed ranks around him, standing firm as the darkness pressed closer. It challenged them openly now, questioning why they still protected a broken idea. It pointed to the fires as proof, to the fear, to the division. It said balance had already died, and all they were doing was delaying the inevitable. Kion stepped forward, smoke clinging to his fur, eyes reflecting fire and doubt. He did not roar. He did not argue. He asked one question, quietly, painfully, honestly. What happens after everything burns? The darkness had no answer that did not lead to endless destruction. The fires continued to rage as the night deepened, and Kion understood the terrible truth. This was not a battle to restore balance. This was the final war to decide whether the Pride Lands would survive at all, and whatever choice he made next would shape the world forever.